someone who doesn't have my policy positions written on an Etch-a-Sketch. I carry around those around.
Rick Santorum taking aim at Republican rival Mitt Romney again today after the gaffe by a Romney aide. The aide indicated Romney could change its positions after the primaries for the fall campaign. His comment that Romney can, quote, shake it up like an Etch-a-Sketch and start all over again is shaking up the Republican presidential race. Let's bring in our News Nation political panel, nationally syndicated radio talk show host Steve Deace, who's endorsed Newt Gingrich, and Aaron McPike back with us, national political reporter for Real Clear Politics. Steve, I'll start off with you here. It's yuckity-yuck jokes about this child's toy, but I want to play what Rachel Maddow said last night about Mitt Romney and how this plays into what we all know folks say, or some of his critics say about him. Let me play it.
This is hard to talk about in the day-to-day news context because there are such low expectations for politicians being truthful, and because the word lie is both underused and overused to the point where everybody's a little tetchy about it. But the degree to which Mr. Romney lies all the time about all sorts of stuff and doesn't care when he gets caught is maybe the single most notable thing about his campaign.
Do you agree with Rachel? Steve, you're the conservative Republican on this panel. I know you're not a fan of Romney, but is she being too hard on him or spot on?
I want the folks on MSNBC and around America, Tamron, to mark the tape, okay? Because something momentous is about to happen.
What is it?
I agree with Rachel Maddow.
Wow.
I may never say that ever again, ever. I mean, I literally, unless she says go blue, I may never say that ever again the rest of my life. But,
okay.
But this time she is correct. This time she's 100% right on. Now, let me say this, though. Listen, this time I'm not going to bury Willard. I'm going to praise him. Because we keep hearing that this entire election is all about jobs. Well, I saw a tweet from your very own Chuck Todd before we came on here this afternoon that said that the stock price for the company that makes Etch-a-Sketch has soared over 200% since yesterday.
I saw that.
Think of the amount of new jobs that will create now in the American economy. So I guess maybe Mitt Romney, after all, does know how to create jobs.
Okay, you hit him hard, Aaron. You see what Rachel said, and in her show, she outlined this laundry list of things that critics of Mitt Romney point to, not just as flip-flop, but in her words, out-and-out lies here. And you've got his top aide saying that this guy can just shake it up and change. That could be called a flip-flop, or it could be something more akin to what Rachel said was just a lie.
You know, it was an inartful comment, that is for sure. But what that campaign aide was trying to say is, you know, the fall campaign is not going to be prosecuted in terms of the margins with conservative Republicans. The nut of the issues will be different because it's two very different ideological positions that the president and that likely Mitt Romney as the general election Republican nominee will be talking about. But yes, it was a problem. But the bigger thing I would tell you is we were just getting to a point where Mitt Romney was starting to seal up the nomination, and here comes another gaffe. Every time Mitt Romney has had a big primary state victory, there's been another gaffe, whether Mitt Romney makes it himself or the campaign does. Now, I spoke to a Nevada congressman yesterday who was one of Mitt Romney's co-chairs for that state, and he was saying how frustrating it is because he needs to represent Mitt Romney in his state in Nevada, and each time they're getting ready to close up the nomination, they have to go and defend on these gaffes again, and it's a problem.
Which is why I think it's wrong to say it's inartful, because I do believe the repercussions of it go past maybe a goofy thing said about this or that, I don't know, the lava lamp comment. Inartful is, I think, putting it mildly, when it can come back to haunt your candidate if he gets that nomination, Steve.
Well, Tamron, the problem with Mitt Romney is, and again, Rachel is correct, we have such a low standard for politicians across the aisle anyway. But in general, but the problem is he lies about stuff. I mean, most politicians will lie about whether it's partly cloudy or mostly sunny, right? I mean, stuff that maybe there are shades of gray in that disagreement. But Romney lies about things that can just be easily disproven. I mean, like, my father marched with Martin Luther King Jr. I'm a lifelong member of the NRA. Stuff like my first name's not Willard. I mean, he lies about things that are objectively proven to be incorrect. And you know, we just saw the Democrats Democrats run somebody who had a flip-flop problem in John Kerry, and the way that that was labeled in 2004, and it was used against him to his detriment in the general election. And this Etch-a-Sketch thing is going to hound Romney all the way through this primary, and if he is the nominee, it is a branding thing that I think you will see the Democrat machine hang like a noose around his neck.
All right, let me change
that's right. If I can just add to that, and I would agree, actually. I've spoken to a number of Republicans on the Hill and who are lobbyists here in Washington, and they are starting to ask me, because I've been covering Mitt Romney for such a long time in this primary, and they're saying to me, do you think Mitt Romney stands a chance of beating President Obama in the fall? And if people in your own party in D.C. who work in politics for a living are asking that, then you know that they've got a major perception problem that they have to deal with. Now, I think the campaign is aware of that, and 7.5 months before the election this fall is a lifetime in politics, so they can. But yeah, they have a long way to go until he's ready to face President Obama. That's
a long way to go, and a lot of other what you call an artful things to be said too. There's both ways to look at it. You can clean it up or mess it up. Let me switch you guys right now. President Obama is headed to Columbus, Ohio. It is the last stop on his 2-day tour defending his energy policies in 4 key swing states as he faces, of course, criticism over surging gas prices, Steve. In fact, earlier today in Oklahoma, the president announced he's fast-tracking construction of the southern segment of that Keystone pipeline from Cushing, Oklahoma to the Gulf Coast. He also took aim at Congress for turning the pipeline, Aaron and Steve, into a political issue. This is what the president said.
Our experts said that we needed a certain amount of time to review the project. Unfortunately, Congress decided they wanted their own timeline. Today, we're making this new pipeline from Cushing to the Gulf a priority. So the southern leg of it, we're making a priority, and we're going to go ahead and get that done. The northern portion of it, we're going to have to review properly to make sure that the health and safety of the American people are protected.
Well, President Obama's health care law is about to take center stage, with the Supreme Court set to consider whether the law is unconstitutional. The justices will hear nearly unprecedented, Steve and Aaron, 6 hours of oral arguments over 3 days next week. And Aaron, what I've been intrigued by, of course, gas prices is the hot button topic, but we know what this health care decision means. And there are a lot of headlines, particularly on progressive blogs, Aaron, that are really teeing up for this big one.
Oh, yeah, and I think there are Democrats going on the offensive as well. House Democrats are actually spending a lot of time this week going on the offensive about it. I would also point out that while we're not hearing very much from the administration on health care right now, you know, we are, again, like I said, hearing from House Democrats, but also from the Democratic National Committee, because they're using contraception issue and women's issues, reproductive rights, to push why the health care law is important. They just put out a web ad on Monday, which actually was important because they were saying without the health care law going into effect in full force in 2014, women will still pay about 50% more than men for their health care. So, you know, they're still pushing on this, and we'll hear a lot more from the Democratic campaigns on this.
And to your point, Aaron, Steve, Aaron brought up that we've got 7 more months to go, but one of the things on the long list of things you don't like about Mitt Romney is, of course, his health care law that he signed while the governor of Massachusetts. In the 7 months, as Aaron pointed out, anything can happen, but we also know one thing is for sure: the GOP rivals and the Democrats will hit Mitt Romney over this as it inches to the Supreme Court. So the hot seat may certainly be that of the president, but if the nominee is Mitt Romney, we also know he shares in that hot coal.
Well, Tamron, you're illustrating a frustration many of us conservatives have, which is we got a lot of grassroots conservatives elected in 2010 to fight Obamacare, and now we're going to send them out for re-election in 2012 to defend Obamacare. But I want to go back to gas prices for just a second. I think that is potentially the most dangerous issue this fall for President Obama, and let me quickly explain why. Because if Romney is the nominee, there really aren't too many issues that Romney can contrast himself with legitimately to lead some kind of a middle-class populist uprising in a general election against the president. He's an elitist. He's been to the left sometimes of the president on some of the social issues earlier in his political career. So he needs issues to draw a contrast. Right now, he's not really running on a contrast other than I'm not Barack Obama. High gas prices can sort of galvanize and become their own self-sustaining catalyst for a middle-class uprising, a populist uprising against an incumbent president. So if I were running the president's machine, I would get out in front of this issue right now, because this is the sort of issue where I don't control my own destiny in a general election if I don't.
Hence the reason he's on that tour. But again, the person that you've endorsed, Newt Gingrich, the best he can come up with is that he can drop gas prices by $2 to $2.50 a gallon, maybe tapping into the strategic oil reserves, maybe not. But we know that he's not at least presented anything that I believe has moved his numbers in the last few primaries. Folks aren't buying what he is selling.
Yeah, you know,
well, simply because Newt has...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If I can add to this, though, we're talking a lot about gas prices as we get into spring and summer, but this happens every election year.
Yeah.
And once the public at large really tunes into the presidential campaign, which will happen in, you know, October, sometimes in September, after Labor Day, gas prices fall again. And this issue will come off the table, I believe, by October.
Yeah, and we also know that when George Bush...
I don't think it's that simple.
Well, when George Bush was blamed, one thing was simple. Republicans said the president had no control over the gas prices. So to now pivot and change the argument and say this president does 4 years later, I think people might not see as being necessarily genuine, Steve. But we'll see what happens. Aaron, Steve, I'm out of time. I greatly appreciate it. We'll see you soon, Steve, for sure.